The United Nations alerted of a possible humanitarian crisis in St. Vincent and the Grenadines due to the eruptions of the volcano Soufriere. Argentina implemented fresh measures to curb the spread of COVID-19 amidst a rapid surge of the disease in the country. Negotiations to bring the United States back into a landmark nuclear deal with Iran are resuming Thursday in Vienna. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. The United Nations alerted of a possible humanitarian crisis in St. Vincent and the Grenadines due to the Soufriere volcano's eruptions. The organization reported that the eruption of the Soufriere might prevent the island's population from accessing various essential products. Most of the poorer sectors in the area are not getting enough drinking water, and local people are forced to endure long queues. The UN called for the international community to enhance solidarity with the island, which has been so far receiving emergency aid from neighboring countries, including Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Grenada, and Venezuela.
The water problem that I will say is not so much a problem here only, it is a national problem. But we are trying to rectify that problem. Presently, we are erecting some more washrooms so that instead of people waiting in long lines, they can move more freely. And by having more washrooms, we are eliminating COVID-19. Because when you have to line up behind each other, they may not do the 3 feet distance. So with having more washroom, people can freely move about, go in and come out at different intervals.
Here we are at the Ivisha Methodist School. We are currently housing 37 evacuees. Most of them came from Overland, Sandy Bay, and Jostrom as well. Majority of the evacuees here are family members, with roughly 4 of them being single males. Yes, we received help from NEMO roughly the same day that the volcano erupted, which was rather rapid, and we also received help from outside donors as well, private donors. Yeah.
In Colombia, the spiral of violence continues. This Wednesday, another social leader was murdered in the municipality of Caucasia, department of Antioquia, numbering 47 such killings so far this year. Dr. Luis Octavio Gutierrez Montes died in the early hours of Wednesday due to wounds caused by a firearm attack last Tuesday. Gutierrez, who was a dentist, also worked as a manager of Hospital Cesar Uribe Piedrahita of the municipality of Caucasia. Gutierrez reportedly had denounced acts of corruption within the hospital. Local authorities repudiated the act and called for investigations to identify the perpetrators. Local residents staged protests demanding justice and the end of violence.
I request that all competent authorities immediately undertake all investigations to ascertain the identity and whereabouts of the material and intellectual authors of this event. A strong rejection of the attacks against the medical mission, against the man who was carrying out a very important task in the management of the hospital.
Meanwhile, people close to Luis Octavio Gutierrez Montes denounced the lack of action by authorities to prevent the killing of social leaders.
We don't understand how, after 20 years in Utuango, where there are guerrillas, where there are paramilitaries, nothing happens to him, and in Caucasia, only taking a year to attempt against the life of Luis Octavio.
Brazil's Supreme Federal Court will decide whether a criminal court located in the city of Curitiba had the jurisdiction to try and convict former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva 3 years ago. The top court's plenary will rule on the habeas corpus petition that led to the decision by Justice Edson Fachin on March the 8th, which annulled all the convictions against the former president and restored his political rights. According to Lula's defense, that ruling demonstrates that the Curitiba court never had the jurisdiction to try the former president and is a major advance in the battle to clear Lula's name. It's a case that was politically biased and sought to prevent him from gaining another electoral victory. Lula was imprisoned for 580 days and banned from running for president in 2018. In the Dominican Republic, the Medical Association has mobilized to demand better fees for health insurance companies. Union President Waldo Ariel Suero stated that 53 medical associations are participating in protests, which concluded with a rally at the headquarters of the Association of Health Risk Administrators in the capital. The union rep stressed that the doctors' fees have not changed for 14 years, which is why they have decided to mobilize to demand that the government meet their request. Doctors also warned that if the demands are not heard, they will suspend medical services in private clinics and hospitals. For the fourth consecutive day, social organizations in Minnesota protest for justice for the murder of Daunte Wright, a young African American. Protesters took street actions in various locations in Minnesota to repudiate police brutality against the African American community and to demand justice from the authorities in the Wright case. Despite measures issued by the local government to prevent demonstrations, protesters warned that they will remain on the streets until a sentence is issued against Kim Potter, responsible for firing the gun at the victim. In the meantime, civil sectors in Atlanta will join the protest against police brutality and racism following the murder of Daunte Wright. Citizens marched for the Centennial Olympic Park emblem accompanied by campartas and slogans demanding justice for the new excessive action by police agencies that caused the death of Wright. In the protest, they reject any racist action against Afro-descendant society. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Argentine President Alberto Fernández announced an extension of a night curfew and the closure of schools in the Buenos Aires metropolitan area in a toughening of measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. The South American country has almost 5 times as many new cases per day compared to a month ago, when the average was 6,000, with the latest figure reaching 25,000.
Held virtually for 2 weeks starting Monday. Teachers, non-teaching staff, and students will not be required to attend classes. The other measures will come into effect at 0 hours on Friday. From 0 hours on Friday until April the 30th, all the activities I have mentioned will be restricted, including circulation on the streets. We have to understand the crucial moment we are living in, and know that I have no political interest in what I am proposing to you today, that I am not here proposing these things to see how I can make political profit, that the only thing that matters to me is preserving health.
A more contagious Brazilian variant of the coronavirus that emerged in the Amazon late last year is fueling fears the pandemic could flare anew, leading several countries to suspend flights from Brazil.
This is a variant that is of great concern because it has a very high transmission capacity. The virus load that each infected person carries from the variant is much higher, so one person can infect many more people. So without doubt, the P1 variant is more transmissible. That is indisputable. Although we are not sure if it is more lethal than the original strain, my perspective is that it is more lethal. We are losing more Brazilians because of the variant that is circulating in our population. So, of course, if I were head of state of another country, I would do everything to prevent that variant from entering my country and spreading.
The suspension of air travel between France and Brazil this week is another blow to an economy severely impacted by the pandemic, and another sign that until infection rates come under control, there will be little chance for a return to normalcy. France joins a list of nations that have restricted or halted flights to Brazil. But travelers continue to arrive despite surging infections that has caused restrictions in major cities like Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. And even though passengers must present a negative COVID-19 test before departure and submit a medical questionnaire to the Brazilian government health agency. A red alert decree came into force in Bogotá's hospitals due to the high number of occupation of the healthcare centers due to the increase of contagion by the COVID-19 in the Colombian capital. As part of the measures announced by the mayor's office, the admission of patients infected with COVID-19 in critical condition from other regions of the country will be cancelled. The measure takes place after the high occupancy of intensive care places in the locality for 2 consecutive days. The Health Secretariat of Bogotá reported that of the 2,377 beds of intensive care, over 1,800 are occupied by patients with COVID-19 and with other pathologies, which reflects a general occupation of 77.2% of its capacity. Colombia recorded more than 16,000 cases of COVID-19 in the last day, which totals nearly 2.6 million cases for the disease since the beginning of the pandemic. Almost 91,000 are active cases. The departments with the most infections this Wednesday were Antioquia, with nearly 4,000 infections, followed by Bogotá with more than 3,600, and Barranquilla with over 2,100. The country counted 267 deaths in the last 24 hours, to add nearly 67,000 deaths since the beginning of the pandemic. The Pan American Health Organization announced on Wednesday that Haiti and Venezuela have rejected the AstraZeneca vaccines provided through the COVAX program, and in the case of Haiti, the doses will be given to another country. Venezuela has said it stands by its decision not to authorize the use of AstraZeneca's coronavirus vaccine in the country.
Moment, the government of Haiti informed that it would not receive the AstraZeneca vaccines. There is no possibility to have an option for another vaccine in countries that are supported. That means we are working with this government of Haiti, with the Ministry of Health, to show them the data, to show them the safety of the vaccine, to provide the recommendation of the EMS, of the European Medicine Agency, so the country can receive the vaccines. Because if the country confirms that they will not receive the vaccines, what happens is that those doses that are already reserved for Haiti will be assigned to other participating countries.
The first batches of a Serbian-produced Russian vaccine will be released by early June, President Alexander Vučić announced on Thursday. While visiting Belgrade's Torlak Virology Institute, domestic production of the Russian vaccine began on April 14th at Torlak. Serbia is also planning to produce the Chinese jab Sinovac as of October 2021.
We will try to produce a total of 20 million vaccines in the beginning, and after that aim for 30 million. So we could secure all that is needed for Serbia. Not only Serbia, but also the broader region. We can be healthy if everyone around us is sick. We intend to develop both scientific research and production. Everything that is necessary for us to become a superpower in vaccine production in the next 10-12 years.
India reported a record high of more than 200,000 new cases in the past 24 hours, taking the total tally to over 14 million, according to the data released by the Health Ministry on Thursday. In trying to cope with the crisis, the Indian government suspended celebrations of Holi, the popular Hindu festival of colors. But thousands ignored the ban and took to the streets anyway. As many as 1,038 deaths were reported in the last 24 hours in India, bringing the death toll so far to almost 174,000. Iraqis received a dose of the BioNTech Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine at a vaccination center in the Al-Kindi hospital in the capital, Baghdad. Iraq received 50,000 doses of BioNTech Pfizer this week, after 336,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine were delivered through the UN's COVAX program, in the second delivery for the Arab state worst hit by the coronavirus epidemic. Iraq now offers 3 types of coronavirus vaccines: Sinopharm, Pfizer BioNTech, and AstraZeneca. And we have more stories coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Negotiations to bring the United States back into a landmark nuclear deal with Iran are resuming Thursday in Vienna. In Tehran, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said Iran will return to its uranium enrichment commitments as soon as the U.S. sanctions come to an end.
We have held tight consultation with various delegations. Today we will restart our work in a more formal manner. Under no circumstances do we seek talks of attrition or talks that just take time or negotiations for the sake of negotiations only. We will declare it clearly today and move in this path. If talks proceed towards a constructive direction that we expect, they will obviously continue. If not, they will stop.
A Russian response to the latest United States sanctions is inevitable, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova warned on Thursday. The U.S. ambassador to Moscow, John Sullivan, was summoned to the ministry to be briefed, Zakharova reported. The United States early Thursday announced economic sanctions against Russia and the expulsion of 10 diplomats in retaliation for what was described as electoral interference, massive cyber attacks, and other hostile activities. Russia has denied the accusations. The new wave of sanctions came amidst tensions escalating in recent weeks, with Ukraine reinforcing military presence on its borders with Russia, as well as the deployment of 2 United States warships to the Black Sea.
States is not ready to come to terms with the objective reality that there is a multipolar world that excludes American hegemony. They are betting on sanctions and interference in our internal affairs. Such aggressive behavior is sure to be firmly countered. A response to sanctions is inevitable. Washington needs to understand that there is a price to pay for the degradation on bilateral relations. The responsibility for what is happening lies entirely with the United States.
Myanmar security forces opened fire on Thursday at a demonstration of medical personnel in Mandalay. About 20 people were detained in a new days of protests against the military junta that seized power in February. At least 714 people have been killed by Myanmar's security forces since the February coup, with over 3,000 arrests, the Association for the Assistance of Political Prisoners said. Aung San Suu Kyi, the deposed president, is also under arrest and awaiting to be tried on charges of promoting unrest, taking bribes, and sharing state secrets. In spite of the shootings and repression, mass protests keep taking the streets of Myanmar cities. NATO allies announced they will start withdrawing their forces from Afghanistan by May the 1st, after the United States announced it will pull its troops out in September. U.S. President Joe Biden announced on Tuesday that Washington will withdraw its remaining 2,500 troops from Afghanistan by September 11th to coincide with the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks that were used to justify the war. The announcement represents a delay of just over 5 months from the May 1st deadline agreed by former U.S. President Donald Trump with the Taliban. The 9,600-strong NATO missions in Afghanistan, which includes the U.S. troops and depends heavily on Washington's military assets, includes personnel from 36 NATO members and partner countries. A drone attack targeted U.S.-led coalition forces near a northern Iraqi airport on Wednesday night, the Kurdish region's interior ministry and coalition officials said. Fire broke out in the cargo section inside the airport. The ministry said the attack targeted coalition forces based near Erbil International Airport and caused a fire that damaged a building. A fire broke out at the airport after the attack, with video shared reportedly from the scene showing flames and smoke rising from the area. A passenger train derailed on Wednesday in Egypt's Nile Delta, injuring at least 15 people, the health ministry said. Local media reported that Turkey's governor Mahmoud Gobara said that 2 carriages of train which was traveling from Cairo had gone off to the tracks in Sharqiya province. It was reported that another train heading in the opposite direction managed to stop and avoid a collision. It was not immediately clear what caused the train to derail. Seven years after the abduction of hundreds of schoolgirls in Chibok, Nigeria, parents and relatives of the victims gathered to pray and mark a day of remembrance. Over 100 girls still remain missing after Boko Haram gunmen seized 276 from a secondary school in the remote town of Chibok in Borno State on April 14, 2014. The group claims Islam opposes the education of women, arguing that under its version of Sharia law, women should be raised to be mothers, servants, and wives.
2 daughters in that school, one Mariam and the other one Hamsatsu Abubakar, and the purpose of enrolling them into school is nothing more than just for them to gain knowledge. The school belongs to the government, and so to speak, I'm not blaming the terrorists, I rather blame the government.
To let the government and authorities have a convergent efforts to rescue our daughters through the grace of God, that's my own wish and desire.
In the French capital, the restoration of the Notre Dame Cathedral 2 years after the fire that almost entirely destroyed the UNESCO World Heritage Site is raising a series of environmental issues. In order to repair Notre Dame ahead of the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris, officials are combing ancient state-owned and private forests for up to 1,000 ancient oak trees in order to replace the cathedral's iconic spire. Critics have condemned the insistence on adhering to historical accuracy in repairing the cathedral. A petition signed by 40,000 people so far noticed that the earth is in danger, with forests suffering from global warming, stressing that the choice to cut down ancient oak trees is incomprehensible. The petition asks, what is the point for a structure that will be by definition be hidden by a cover and visible only by a few privileged people, instead suggesting that in the 21st century it would be better to choose more responsible engineered techniques that are less damaging to the environment. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.